At exactly 11:59 p.m., Daniel Vale heard a train arrive at a station that had been closed for 32 years. The strange thing was not the sound of the train. The strange thing was that there was no railway line left. Daniel had spent most of his career investigating railway failures, accidents, and impossible reports. He knew every active route in northern England. He knew every abandoned tunnel, every forgotten platform, every rusted track buried beneath weeds and concrete. And this station was not supposed to exist. The old Blackmere line had been sealed after the accident that took 14 lives and left one person missing, his sister, Emily Vale. 15 years had passed since that night, but Daniel still remembered the final phone call. A broken voice, a sudden silence, and then nothing. The official report called Emily a victim of circumstances. Daniel called it unfinished. That was why he was standing outside the locked entrance of Blackmere Tunnel on a cold November night, holding a flashlight in one hand and a case file in the other. The investigation was supposed to be routine. A few workers had reported hearing a train horn coming from inside the abandoned tunnel. Daniel expected faulty equipment. A prank. Maybe someone exploring where they shouldn't. He did not expect to find a ticket lying on the ground. An old paper ticket, yellowed edges, faded ink. The kind of ticket nobody had used in decades. Daniel picked it up carefully. Then his breathing stopped. The passenger name printed on it was Daniel Vale. His fingers tightened around the paper. That was impossible. The date printed beneath the name was even worse. The ticket had been issued 15 years ago, the exact night Emily disappeared. Daniel turned it over, expecting some explanation, a mistake, a hidden message, anything. On the back, there were only 4 words, D's written in black ink. Platform 0 awaits you. A sound echoed through the tunnel. Not loud, not sudden, just the slow movement of something massive approaching from the darkness. Daniel raised his flashlight. A pair of lights appeared in the distance. A train, moving silently through a tunnel where no tracks existed. Daniel stepped back as the impossible machine emerged from the darkness. No company logo, no destination display. Only one word written across the front, lost. The train stopped directly in front of him. The doors opened, and from inside the empty carriage, a voice called his name. Daniel. He froze, because he knew that voice. It belonged to someone who had been missing for 15 years. Daniel. The voice came from inside the train, not through a speaker, not through a recording. A real voice. A voice carrying the same quiet hesitation he remembered from childhood mornings, from family dinners, from the last time he heard it over the phone. Daniel stepped closer to the open doors. His flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went completely dark. Emily? The name left his mouth before he could stop himself. For several seconds, there was only silence. The train waited. No engine noise, no movement, just the faint sound of rain falling somewhere beyond the tunnel entrance. Daniel looked back. The path behind him had changed. The entrance where he had walked in was no longer visible. The darkness stretched endlessly in both directions, swallowing the tunnel walls. His instincts told him to leave. Every investigation he had ever worked on had followed the same rule. When something doesn't make sense, step away until it does. But this wasn't an investigation anymore. This was the first sign of the person he had spent 15 years trying to find. Daniel stepped onto the train. The moment his foot touched the floor, the doors closed behind him. The carriage was empty. At least, it looked empty. Rows of old leather seats stretched into the distance, disappearing around a curve that shouldn't have existed inside a single train carriage. The air smelled like old paper and rain-soaked coats. Daniel walked slowly down the aisle. Every window showed darkness outside. Not the darkness of a tunnel. Something deeper, something without shape. He stopped beside one seat. A newspaper was lying there. The front page was faded, but the headline was still readable. Blackmere Rail Accident Investigation Suspended. Daniel picked it up. His hands went cold. The newspaper was dated 15 years ago. The exact day, Emily Vanni. A voice suddenly spoke behind him. "You're not supposed to be reading the newspapers." Daniel turned sharply. A man stood at the end of the carriage, around 60 years old, grey suit, black gloves, a silver watch attached to a chain across his waistcoat. He looked less like a train employee and more like someone who had stepped out of another century. "Who are you?" Daniel asked. The man smiled slightly. "That depends on what answer you are looking for." Daniel didn't move. "I'm looking for my sister." The man's expression changed. Not much. Just enough. Like someone hearing a name they had been expecting. Emily Vale. Daniel tightened his jaw. "You know her." The man looked down the empty carriage. "Everyone who arrives here is looking for someone." "That wasn't my question." "No," the man replied calmly. "It rarely is." Daniel stepped forward. "Where is she?" The man ignored the question and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small metal object and placed it on the nearest table. A railway key. Old. Rusted. But Daniel recognized the design. It belonged to the Blackmere station staff, a system that had been destroyed 15 years ago. "This train doesn't take people where they want to go," the man said. "Then where does it go?" The man looked directly at him. "Where they were supposed to be." The lights inside the carriage flickered. For a brief moment, Daniel saw something outside the window. A station platform. People standing still. Hundreds of them, watching the train. Then the darkness returned. Daniel moved closer to the window. "Who are those people?" The man walked past him and pressed a button near the carriage door. The train began moving. Slowly. Quietly. Without any tracks beneath it. "Those," the man said, "are the ones who lost something." Daniel watched the darkness outside. And what did they lose? The man looked at him through the reflection in the glass. Sometimes a person. Sometimes a choice. Sometimes themselves. A sound echoed through the train. A station announcement. A woman's voice. Calm. Almost gentle. "Welcome to Platform 0. Daniel stopped breathing. Because the voice wasn't familiar. It wasn't Emily. But it was his own voice. The announcement ended. For a few seconds, Daniel could only hear the sound of the train moving through the impossible darkness. His own voice. Coming from a station he had never seen. Coming from somewhere outside the world he knew. He turned toward the man in the grey suit. "What was that?" The man didn't answer immediately. He watched the passing darkness outside the window, as if waiting for something. "That was the station welcoming you?" Daniel stared at him. "No. It was my voice." "Yes." "How?" The man adjusted his gloves. "That is usually the question people ask first." Daniel stepped closer. "I don't have time for riddles." The man finally looked at him. "Everyone says that when they arrive here." A quiet sound came from the end of the carriage. A door opening. Daniel looked past him. Another section of the train had appeared. A moment ago, there had been only a wall. Now there was a narrow hallway leading into another carriage. The grey-suited man walked toward it. "Come." Daniel didn't move. "Where?" The man stopped. "To the place where you will decide whether you still want answers." Daniel gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's not how questions work." The man looked back. "No. That's how people work." Daniel followed. The next carriage was different. The old leather seats were gone. Instead, there were glass doors along both sides. Behind each door was a room, not a normal room, a life. Daniel slowed down. Behind the first glass panel, he saw a family kitchen. A woman stood near the counter laughing. A teenage girl sat at the table. Daniel froze. The girl turned. Even through the glass, he knew her. Emily. But younger, alive. The same expression, the same way she tilted her head when she was annoyed. Daniel moved toward the glass. No. The man remained behind him. Do not touch the door. Daniel ignored him. His hand lifted. Emily inside the room looked directly at him. For one impossible second, it felt like she could see him. She walked toward the glass. Her lips moved. Daniel couldn't hear anything. Then she placed her hand against the other side, the same place where Daniel's hand was hovering. A sharp pain crossed his chest. 15 years of questions. 15 years of imagining this moment. And now she was standing inches away. But something was wrong. The room behind her wasn't the past. It was different. On the kitchen wall was a photograph. Daniel and Emily together. Older. Happy. A version of their lives that never happened. Daniel pulled his hand away. What is this? The man answered quietly. A possibility. Daniel looked at him. That's not possible. The man gave a small smile. You're standing inside a train that has no tracks. Daniel had no response. He looked back at the glass. The scene had changed. Now he saw himself inside the room. Older. Different. No investigation files. No sleepless nights. No unanswered questions. Just a normal life. A life where Emily had never disappeared. The version of Daniel inside the room was laughing. Something the real Daniel couldn't remember doing in years. Then the other Daniel looked toward the glass, directly at him, and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A warning. The lights above the carriage flickered. The room disappeared. Daniel stepped back. That wasn't a memory. No, the man said. It wasn't. Then what was it? The man opened the next door. Your greatest temptation. Daniel looked down the endless corridor. More doors waited. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Each one hiding a different version of his life. A different Daniel. A different choice. A different loss. The man spoke softly. Platform Zero does not show people what they miss. He looked at Daniel. It shows them what they are willing to abandon. A bell rang somewhere ahead. One of the doors unlocked. Slowly. Inside that room, someone whispered Daniel's name. But this time, it wasn't his sister. The door unlocked with a soft click. Daniel stood still. The voice from inside the room had been quiet, almost careful. Not a stranger. Not a memory. Someone who knew him. The man in the grey suit remained several steps behind. You don't have to enter. Daniel looked back. Why are you telling me that? Because everyone believes the hardest part is finding the door. The man glanced at the room. They are usually wrong. Daniel looked through the glass. The room was small. A bedroom. Nothing unusual. A wooden desk. A bookshelf. A window showing a rainy street outside. A life that looked ordinary. That was what made it unsettling. Platform Zero had shown him impossible things, but this room felt real. Too real. Daniel slowly pushed the door open. The moment he stepped inside, the train disappeared. No movement, no sound, No vibration, only silence. He turned around. The door behind him was gone. "Daniel?" He stopped. The voice came from near the window. A woman stood with her back toward him. Dark hair, grey sweater, one hand resting against the glass. Daniel couldn't move. The years between them vanished for 1 second. Not because they weren't there, because his mind refused to accept them. "Emily?" She turned. She looked older. Not the girl from his memories. Not the 23-year-old who disappeared. A woman who had lived 15 years he knew nothing about, but her eyes were the same. "You took longer than I expected." Daniel stared at her. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Emily looked down. "That's probably not the welcome you imagined. You're alive." She gave a small, tired smile. That's usually the first thing people say. Daniel took a step forward. "Where have you been?" Emily didn't answer. "Daniel?" "No." His voice became sharper. "No, don't do that. Don't say my name like every time." Hing is normal. The room seemed smaller. "I spent 15 years looking for you." Emily looked away. "I know." "You know?" "Yes." "How?" She walked toward the desk. There was a photograph sitting there. Daniel noticed it immediately. A picture of them, but not the picture he remembered. In this one, they were older, standing outside a house, smiling, a life that had never happened. Emily picked it up. "Because I watched." Daniel looked at her. "Watched what?" "You." The answer made him uncomfortable. "From here?" Emily nodded. "Sometimes." Daniel looked around the room. "Where is here?" She placed the photograph back. "Platform 0. The name sounded heavier coming from her. "How did you get here?" Emily was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel noticed. "Emily." She looked at him. "I didn't disappear." The words landed harder than he expected. "Then what happened?" "I chose." Daniel frowned. "Chose what?" Emily looked toward the missing door. "The same thing everyone chooses when they come here." She walked past him slowly. "Another version of themselves?" Daniel shook his head. "You're saying you left?" "No." She stopped. "I stayed." The silence between them felt impossible to cross. "Why?" Emily looked at him. "Because the version of life I wanted was here." Daniel's expression changed. "You stayed because of a fake world?" Emily's eyes hardened. "It's not fake." "Emily, you think your world is more real because you can touch it?" She stepped closer. "Daniel, how many times have you replayed that night?" He said nothing. "How many times have you imagined going back?" His silence answered. Emily lowered her voice. "This place doesn't create lies." She looked around the room. "It creates possibilities." A faint sound came from outside. A train announcement. But the words were distorted. Emily's face changed. Fear. Real fear. Daniel noticed. "What is it?" She moved toward the window. "We don't have much time." "Why?" She looked at him. "Because the station knows you're here now." The lights above them flickered. The walls shook. For the first time since arriving, Emily looked afraid. "Daniel, listen carefully." He watched her. "The train didn't bring you here because you were looking for me." Another tremor moved through the room. "It brought you here because it needs you." Daniel felt a cold sensation move through him. "Needs me for what?" Emily looked toward the wall. A crack appeared across the glass. Behind it was not another room, not another life. Only darkness, and something moving inside it. To replace me. The glass shattered. The glass shattered. Daniel raised his arm instinctively as pieces of glass flew across the room, but none of them reached him. They stopped in mid-air. Suspended. Frozen. For one impossible second, every shard hung between them like tiny pieces of a broken mirror. Then they dropped. Not onto the floor, into the darkness beneath the room. Daniel looked down. There was no floor anymore. Only a black emptiness stretching below them. Emily grabbed his arm. Move. For the first time since seeing her again, Daniel heard panic in her voice. Not sadness, not regret. Fear. Real fear. Move where? Daniel asked. The walls around them began changing. The bedroom disappeared piece by piece. The desk faded. The photograph vanished. The window cracked into nothing. The room was being erased. Emily pulled him toward the doorway, a doorway that had not existed moments earlier. Where does this go? Somewhere the station doesn't want you to see. Daniel stopped. What does that mean? Emily looked at him. It means you finally asked the right question. They stepped through. The moment Daniel crossed the doorway, the sound changed. The quiet of the train was gone. Now he heard voices. Hundreds of them. Whispers coming from every direction. He looked around. They were standing in a massive underground hall, bigger than any railway station he had ever seen. Rows of platforms stretched into the distance, but there were no trains. Only people. Hundreds of people sitting on benches, standing near signs, walking slowly through the empty platforms, all of them waiting. Daniel looked at Emily. Who are they? She didn't answer immediately. A man sitting nearby laughed quietly. Daniel turned. The man looked around 50 years old. He wore a faded university jacket and held an old book in his hands. You don't know yet? Daniel stares. It at him. Know what? The man smiled. We're the ones who stayed. Emily looked uncomfortable. Don't talk to him. The man ignored her. I was supposed to become a professor. He looked down at his hands. Instead, I became someone who reads about the life I could have had. Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? The man tapped the book. Every person here has a door. He looked toward the endless platforms. A different life, a different choice. And you chose one? The man laughed. No. His smile disappeared. That's the problem. Daniel looked at Emily. What happens if they choose? Emily answered quietly. They don't come back the same. The man nodded. At first, it feels perfect. He opened the book. Inside were photographs. Not drawings. Photographs. Different versions of himself. Older. Younger. Different careers. Different families. Different lives. But after a while you notice something. He closed the book. The life you entered starts taking pieces of the one you left behind. Daniel looked around. What pieces? Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Memories. A cold feeling moved through Daniel. The man continued. You forget why you came here. You forget who you were trying to escape. You forget the people waiting for you. Daniel looked at the people around him. Some stared at the ground. Some looked confused. Some seemed completely lost. How long have they been here? Emily looked away. Some don't know. Daniel noticed something. Every person on the platform had a small metal tag attached to their clothing. A name, a date, a destination. He walked toward one of them, An elderly woman sitting alone. Her tag read, Margaret Hall. Return, unknown. Daniel looked at Emily. Why does it say unknown? Emily didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. A sound came from above. The entire station trembled. The lights flickered. Every person stopped moving. They all looked toward the same place, a clock hanging above the central platform. Daniel followed their eyes. The clock had no numbers, only one word written across its face. Choice. The second hand moved back.
Quad once. Twice. Then stopped. The grey-suited man appeared at the edge of the platform. You shouldn't have brought him here. Emily stepped in front of Daniel. He's not yours. The man's expression remained calm. Everyone says that before they understand. Daniel looked between them. What is happening? The man looked at him. The station has been waiting 15 years for you. Emily's face tightened. Don't listen to him. The man continued. Because you are the only person who has already left. Daniel stared. What does that mean? The man took one step forward. It means your sister didn't disappear. A pause. She was replaced. The station lights went out. The station lights went out. For a moment there was nothing. No voices. No movement. No sound except Daniel's own breathing. Then the emergency lights turned on. A deep red glow spread across the platforms. The people who had been sitting quietly began to move, not quickly, not in panic. Almost like they had done this before. Daniel looked at Emily. What did he mean? She didn't answer. Emily. Her eyes stayed fixed on the grey-suited man. He told you the truth. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Then explain it. Emily looked at him. I didn't disappear that night. The station trembled. A crack moved across the ceiling above them. I found Platform 0 before you did. Daniel stared. How? Emily looked down. Because I was looking for you. The answer confused him. Me? She nodded. After our parents died, you changed. Daniel looked away. He didn't want to hear this. You stopped living. You just investigated. Every missing person, every accident, every unexplained case. Emily stepped closer. You thought if you found enough answers, you could fix what happened. Daniel's jaw tightened. And you thought disappearing was the solution? No. Her voice became softer. I thought finding another version of us was. The words stayed between them. Daniel looked around at the people on the platforms. All these people came here because they wanted a different life. Emily nodded. And the station gave it to them. Then why is everyone trapped? Her expression changed. Because a perfect life is harder to leave than a painful one. A loud metallic sound echoed through the station. The grey-suited man walked toward them. Every step he took made the floor beneath him shake. Daniel looked at him. Who are you? The man stopped. My name doesn't matter. Everyone here has a name. The man looked at the waiting. Passengers. Names belong to people who still have somewhere to go. Daniel noticed something. The metal tag hanging from the man's coat. Unlike the others, his tag had no name, only a single word, Keeper. You run this place? The keeper looked at him. No. He glanced around. I maintain it. What's the difference? The keeper gave a faint smile. The difference is that machines can be controlled. A pause. Stations cannot. Emily stepped forward. Don't listen to him. The keeper looked at her. You still blame me. I should. You blame me because you don't want to admit why you stayed. Emily's expression hardened. Daniel looked between them. What is he talking about? Neither answered. The keeper continued. Your sister was given a choice. Daniel turned to Emily. What choice? Emily was silent. The keeper answered for her. She could return to your world. Daniel waited. And? Or she could take the place of the person who keeps this station alive. The red lights flickered. Daniel looked at Emily. You became the keeper? Emily shook her head. No. Her voice dropped. I stopped someone else from becoming him. Daniel looked at the man. The keeper said nothing. For the first time, his calm expression disappeared, only for a second. But Daniel noticed. What does the station need from me? The keeper looked toward the far end of the platform. A train was arriving, different from the others, older, darker. The windows were completely black. The station is unstable. The train stopped. The last person who connected both worlds disappeared 15 years ago. Daniel understood. His eyes moved toward Emily. You. She didn't deny it. The keeper looked at Daniel. The station has been searching for a replacement ever since. Daniel stepped back. No. Emily grabbed his arm. Daniel, listen. He looked at her. I came here to find you. I know. But I didn't come here to take your place. Emily's expression changed. Then why did you come? Daniel looked at the train. The answer was obvious now. The ticket. The impossible train. The voice calling his name. It wasn't a rescue. It was an invitation. A trap. The keeper opened the train door. Inside was darkness. But from somewhere inside the carriage came a sound. A voice. Daniel recognized it immediately. His own voice, speaking words he had never said. You should have stayed away. The keeper looked at him. Every person who arrives here believes they are choosing. The train waited. But eventually they learned the truth. Daniel stared into the darkness. What truth? The keeper answered quietly. The station doesn't take your choice away. A pause. It shows you what you will choose when nobody is watching. The train doors began closing. Emily grabbed Daniel's hand. Whatever happens, don't go inside. Daniel looked at her, then at the closing doors, and saw something reflected in the black glass. A version of himself sitting inside, waiting, smiling. The doors stopped. The train had chosen to wait. The train had chosen to wait. Daniel stared at the reflection in the black glass. The other version of himself sat inside the carriage, still, patient, almost like he had been expecting this exact moment. Emily tightened her grip around Daniel's hand. Don't look at him. Daniel didn't move. Why? Because he wants you to. The reflection inside the train smiled. Not because Daniel smiled. Not because he moved. It smiled on its own. Daniel stepped closer. The glass showed him a version of himself wearing a different life. A wedding ring. A clean office suit. A face without exhaustion. A face without 15 years of searching. The other Daniel lifted a hand, then pointed behind him. Daniel looked inside the carriage. At first, he saw nothing. Then the lights slowly turned on. A house, a garden, a family dinner, a life. His life. The one he never had. Emily pulled him back. Daniel. He looked at her.
What if he's right? Her expression changed. What? What if that version of me isn't a lie? Emily didn't answer, because that was the dangerous part. She knew it too. The keeper stood near the platform entrance, watching them. You see? Daniel looked at him. What? The station doesn't tempt people with fantasies. The keeper stepped closer. It tempts them with things that make sense. Daniel looked back at the train. The other Daniel was now standing, closer to the glass. You could have had everything. Daniel's face tightened. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was inside his head. You could have stopped looking. You could have been happy. Daniel closed his eyes. Images moved through his mind. Emily laughing. A home. A normal life. No case files. No empty apartment. No nights spent staring at old photographs. The kind of peace he had secretly wanted but never admitted. Then something hanged. A small detail. On the table inside that perfect house was a photograph. Daniel looked closer. It was a family picture. But someone was missing. Emily. The smile disappeared from his face. He opened his eyes. The other Daniel was watching him. You noticed. Daniel looked at the reflection. What did you do? The other version of him smiled. I made the choice you were too afraid to make. Emily stepped beside him. Don't listen. The reflection turned toward her, and for the first time its expression changed. Anger. You don't get to talk about choices. Emily froze. Daniel looked at her. The reflection continued. You chose this place over him. The station became silent. Daniel looked at Emily. What does he mean? Emily didn't answer. The reflection laughed quietly. Ask her. Daniel turned. Emily looked away. Daniel? No. His voice was low. No more secrets. A long silence passed. Then Emily spoke. The night I found Platform Zero. She swallowed. I wasn't trying to save myself. Daniel waited. I was trying to save you. The station shook. The lights above them flickered. The keeper looked toward the ceiling. It's starting. Daniel ignored him. Save me from what? Emily looked at him. From becoming this. She pointed toward the train. Daniel looked at the reflection. The other Daniel placed his hand against the glass. And Daniel finally noticed something. The reflection wasn't trapped inside. The reflection was waiting for him to enter. You were never supposed to replace Emily. The keeper's voice cut through the platform. Daniel turned. You were supposed to replace yourself. The train doors opened wider. A cold wind moved through the station. The waiting passengers began stepping away from the platforms, one by one, like they knew something was coming. Emily grabbed Daniel's coat. There's another way. The keeper looked at her. No. Emily faced him. There has to be. You know there isn't. Daniel looked between them. What are you both hiding? Neither answered. Then the station clock changed. The word choice disappeared. New letters appeared. Return. The keeper looked at Daniel. The station can only release one person. Daniel stared. One? Emily's hand slowly slipped away from his arm. Daniel noticed. No. She looked at him. Daniel, no. He understood before she said it. The train wasn't asking him to choose between lives. It was asking him to choose. Who gets to leave. The black windows reflected two versions of him. One who wanted the life he lost. One who wanted the person he found. Daniel stepped toward the train. Emily grabbed his shoulder. Don't! He looked back. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't looking for answers. He was looking at his sister. "I spent my whole life trying to bring you back." Emily's eyes filled. "Daniel." He looked at the open carriage. "Maybe I was supposed to understand why you never came back." The train doors began closing. The reflection inside smiled. Daniel stepped forward, one foot inside the carriage, then another. Emily shouted his name. The doors stopped. The train waited. And from somewhere deep inside the station, another train began arriving. The train doors stopped. Daniel stood between two worlds, one foot inside the carriage, one foot on the platform. Behind him, Emily was still calling his name. But something had changed. The sound of her voice was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with understanding, as if she finally knew what he was about to do. The second train arrived. It moved slower than the first, much slower. Its metal body was covered in scratches and faded marks. Not from years of use, from thousands of journeys. The doors opened. No announcement, no invitation, only silence. The keeper looked at it and stepped back. For the first time, Daniel saw uncertainty on his face. "What is that?" The keeper didn't answer. Emily did. "The first train shows what you want." She looked at the new arrival. "This one shows what you are." Daniel looked inside. The carriage was empty, no reflection, no alternate life, no perfect version waiting, just a single seat. And on that seat was an old photograph. Daniel knew it before he even picked it up. Emily. Him. Their parents. A family picture taken years before everything fell apart. But there was something wrong. Daniel looked closer. The photograph was different from the one he remembered. Someone had been removed. His own image. He stared at it. "Why am I missing?" Emily slowly walked closer. "Because the station has been trying to understand you." Daniel looked at her. "Understand me?" "The station doesn't know what you are." A quiet pause. "It knows everyone who comes here wants something." Daniel looked at the empty photograph. "But not me." Emily shook her head. "No. You came here because you wanted to find someone else." The train lights flickered. The empty seat inside moved slightly, like someone invisible had just stood up. The keeper spoke from behind them. "That's why he is different." Daniel turned. "Different how?" The keeper looked at him. "Most people arrive here because they cannot accept the life they have." A pause. "You arrived because you could not accept losing someone else's." Daniel looked at Emily. For years, he had believed his search was about justice, about answers, about finding the truth. But standing there, inside a place that could show him anything he wanted, he finally understood the dangerous part. The station had never needed to convince him. He had already been carrying his own door. Emily touched his shoulder. "Daniel." He looked at her. "If I go back..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Both of them knew what the station demanded. One person returned. One remained. Daniel looked at the first train. The perfect life waited inside. The second train waited too. But it offered nothing. No promises, no comfort, only the truth. He stepped away from the first train. The reflection inside disappeared. For the first time, the other Daniel looked afraid. The doors closed. The train began moving, slowly, carrying away every version of the life Daniel could have chosen. The second train remained. Daniel turned toward Emily. "Can you come with me?" Her eyes lowered. "No." The answer was quiet but final. "Why?" Emily smiled sadly. "Because I already chose.
The station shook violently. The platforms cracked. People began running. The waiting passengers were disappearing. Not dying, not vanishing, returning. One by one. The station was releasing them. The keeper looked toward the ceiling. It's collapsing. Daniel looked at him. Why? The keeper looked at Emily. Because the station cannot exist without a keeper. Daniel understood. Emily had been holding it together all this time, keeping thousands of lost people from being trapped forever. Then what happens to you? Emily didn't answer. She didn't have to. Daniel stepped toward the second train. No. Emily grabbed his arm. Daniel. He looked back. I'm not leaving you here again. Her eyes filled. You don't get to fix everything. A small smile appeared on her face. You never learned that. Daniel almost laughed. Almost. Then the station shook again. The floor beneath them started breaking apart. The keeper shouted, "Daniel!" A doorway appeared at the end of the platform. Not a train door. A normal door. Behind it was sunlight. The real world. Daniel looked at it, then back at Emily. The choice was clear. The station wasn't asking who deserved to leave. It was asking who was willing to stay. Daniel walked toward the door. Emily watched him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel stopped. He reached into his pocket. The old ticket was still there. The same ticket that had brought him here. He placed it on the platform and walked away. The moment he crossed the doorway, the station disappeared.